Dude, I really feel.
Ryan, we're live. You know, I didn't know you were coming today. I
Oh,
didn't. We
surprise! I'm
don't have
here.
you. Yeah, surprise, surprise. We didn't have you on the banner, but I'm glad you're here because we're going to talk about what's happening on campus and how the entrepreneur experience rooms fit together. And we've been talking about this a lot because we're finally starting to understand. So, doing a pilot for a year is part of the point of doing a pilot is instead of bringing everybody in because you need to make money right away or you're focused on making money right away or even if you don't need to make money right away, sometimes it's or even if you need to make money right away, sometimes it's a good idea to do a pilot.
Mhm.
And the reason is simple. It's that we're trying to figure it out, and we have, and we finally are able to understand how all our rooms work together.
I had such a profound experience today. We start the day playing with energy, and that can be woo, it can be quantum mechanics, your language. And I find that when the energy is higher, so is the frequency of epiphanies. That's the science. That's the quantum mechanics of that. And it just prepared me so beautifully to be in the more money now. Like it takes time. These 8-week courses, these mastermind groups. Today, the rubber finally hit the road on my place in the market, and it took the experience sharing to know how to do that.
So let me explain these terms to people because they're just common sense. So Brian runs the Invincibility Dojo. What does that mean? It means becoming invincible, meaning you have a feeling of invincibility in the morning and you don't go into the marketplace not feeling invincible. So some people call that fear. Some people say, well, I'm not afraid. That's fine. But are you holding back? Okay,
Mm.
you don't have to call it fear if you don't want. If you don't want to, you're going to get invincible in the morning. That's 30 minutes. And then we move into what we call the More Money Now room, which is about, okay, now that I feel that way, how do I exist out into the marketplace in a creative business development approach as opposed to chasing after clients? Simple.
Mhm. It's neat how all of these. So I've been part of mastermind groups before, so we meet once a week. There's homework or whatever, and it's just neat having things like with my breath practice. I trained with Wim Hof, and the week before I was meeting him, I'm like, I should probably have a daily breath practice. If I meet somebody that that's what he does, and that was April 13th of 2018, and it's been an everyday practice. And what I'm noticing in having 12 experiences a week, leading some of them, my individual tactician approaches have changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And also the ability to facilitate breakthroughs for others because I do it every day. That compounds in the same way that Michael Phelps. The reason Michael Phelps never missed a day in the pool is because he knew that if he missed a day, he goes back in time 2 days.
Yeah.
So that sustainment thing that I'm finding very useful.
So I've been in an advanced elite mastermind community, which I dropped out of. I did not renew in October, and it's elite. It's really the top people in the world at these kinds of practices, and they have a daily thing that I would say is similar from perspective. It's not though to the Invincibility Dojo you're running, and it's a daily Wim Hof style breathing, and then they do some Joe Dispenza stuff session to become invincible throughout the day. It doesn't work for me. Why? Because it's following a recording of his approach.
Mm-hmm.
And even if, and that's not a mastermind in my perspective at all.
No.
And it's not. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the same thing. And this is what we're trying to explain to people. And it's difficult for people to understand because it's just not the same. If you're copying somebody else, even if the leader of that mastermind is the best in the world at what they're doing and they're teaching it, it's not going to work in the same way. And Wim Hof, when you studied with him, he didn't have a Wim Hof breath method to teach, did he?
No, he was so present in the moment and like triangulating what the group needed intuitively. It was different every time.
Yeah, explain that because it's different every time means marketing packages things to make them easier to sell. So the marketing packaged product is not as good as the how you can do it product. In other words, someone who's actually a real expert like Wim Hof is in the entire context
Yeah,
of becoming invincible is not teaching how to do it like he did it or does it at
exactly.
all.
I have a friend, his name is John. And for the last 15 years, he's like, man, I'm going to learn the Wim Hof method. Okay, John, I don't believe you. He's like, what? John, we would have done it already, man. Like you did that. You did the 10-week course and it didn't stick. That's not your method. And I remember in 2019, I didn't really like exercise. The CrossFit stuff didn't resonate anymore. I used to be a runner. That didn't resonate anymore. And I found Steel Mace Flow, this 10-pound steel bar with a cannonball on the end of it. And I started dancing with a weight to music.
Oh my God.
And I would trick myself, did like a 45-minute, hour-long, exhaustive set. And I left. I'm like, man, that was fun. And it was different every time. And it doesn't look like any of the standardized workout protocols.
And what happens then is that becomes the program. So then somebody says, oh, that worked for me. And then they teach it to everybody else. And then I show up and I see that, and there's a pain I have. And that thing that Brian figured out becomes the answer to my pain and is being promoted as such.
Mm-hmm.
That's never going to work for me.
Not long term.
Even short term for me, because I don't care about that. But I may believe I do because I'm looking for an answer. And somebody shows up. You're looking for an answer because you have a pain. There's somebody who's going to show up with an answer in your field of vision today, because everyone's marketing everything everywhere.
And it's so interesting. I'm noticing the collective consciousness, the awareness of the marketing stuff, like the expository stories on Instagram and Facebook. And here's my story. And
keep going.
And I'm waiting for the sales pitch at the end. Like, join if this resonates, drop me a yes, and I'll send you my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, exactly.
We're going to talk about this when you finish.
And then the other thing, it's like the sales stuff. How do I get you to do what I want you to do? And we all now have awareness of what Chris Voss did with Black Swan and Never Split the Difference, or what Jeremy Miner's doing with neural emotional persuasive questioning. It's like, the folks that I like working with, they already know that shit.
So you're getting into some black diamond skiing here. Why don't you explain those terms, those people, for people who don't know even what you're talking about?
Yeah, gotcha. So if recently you've heard somebody, hey, is today a bad time to meet? Instead of going for the yes, you get the no. It's a tactic. And that used to work until everyone's using it. And now it's like, oh, that's Chris
You're
Voss.
talking about a sales method.
Yeah.
And who created the sales method?
It's Chris Voss.
Chris Voss. So now everybody's doing the Chris Voss sales method, correct?
Right.
Right. So then what happens?
Then Jeremy Miner comes along and he starts asking questions like, well, what does that mean for you, though?
Right. So now everyone's doing that.
Right. And I find that with the magic of this inner work, the second I use the sales technique, the magic's gone. Now he's forcing me into this like sales funnel, and the trust is gone because it was a technique. It's not mine.
Right. So the problem is the technique. So the problem is not, and the solution is not a better way to get people to do what you want. The solution is to do none of it today. Now, some people will, and I'm not preaching to acquire, and I'm not preaching to people I'm trying to convert to a belief system, because I don't have one at all.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm looking at it is find your way. So if that works for you and you define works, do it. What we're saying is we see saturation in the society with this.
Mm-hmm.
This book is the problem right now, because this is taken as a biblical text, and it is even presented that way. The Psychology of Persuasion, over 3 million copies sold. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, and Warren Buffett's photos on his site. I couldn't believe it. Next to Alex Hormozy and Russell Brunson. I'm like, how did that happen? This is the book that I give most often as a present. and is my top recommendation, Charlie Munger. I cannot imagine Warren and Charlie ever using any of the techniques in this book. And these are presented as principles. They're not.
No, and that was never the intention of the book.
It wasn't.
The intention of the book is to show the reader, where are you being hijacked?
Exactly. That's right. And then I'm like, I found Robert Cialdini. He's a professor of marketing at Arizona State. And then I'm listening to him on a podcast, and I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on here? This book is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
It's genius, because he did incredible experiments to help understand why people, what will work to persuade people. And then he started calling it ethical persuasion. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then he defined ethical persuasion as, well, of course, this is good, versus manipulation, which means somebody's lying. And I'm like, I don't see a difference.
Yeah.
I don't see a difference at all. Why? So the idea of reciprocity, of social proof, from the perspective of ethical persuasion, which doesn't exist because that's not real, is you need me to tell you what to do and where to go, because the society and social proof's good, because that means everybody goes left. Sheep go in the pen. So it's a good pen because all the sheep are there. So I'm going to do that and get you in the pen. And of course I'm going to do that because that's good for everybody. That's the idea of ethical persuasion. Unless I'm misunderstanding what Robert Cialdini said on the podcast, and I don't think I am, but maybe I am. I'm open to being said, no, Larry, you misunderstood. He doesn't mean that.
Well, and it's important to note what you just said, in that there's missing information. I have an opinion, so I ran an experiment, and here's what we're finding.
Yeah.
And so what I'm experiencing in having 12 workshop courses per week, I get a lot of soak time to. I shared a quote today in the Invincibility Dojo: be suspect of all opinions, but especially my own.
Yeah.
And so having the reflection of other people with a similar vision, not the same vision, that's not what I'm saying, but moving in a similar direction.
So the similar direction based on laws, principles, and mechanisms that actually are really laws, principles, and mechanisms is not the same as learning things that are not principles that are presented as principles. And this is very confusing for people and me. So I'm looking at it as, let's run some experiments here, which is what Robert Cialdini did.
Mm-hmm.
And my experiment is, the minute I try to use intentionally any persuasion principle in this society, people have a guard that goes up and they don't even realize it.
Yes. Yeah. One of the useful things from Jeremy Miner's stuff is that trust died in 2008.
2008. It was about the day. I remember 2008 is when I shut off the news. I stopped listening to any cable news. 2008, that was the year. That was a pivotal year of the people just saying, I don't know what the hell they're talking about, but I know I don't care.
So before then, we were taught, I was certainly taught this as a child, your initial intuitiveness, the vibe, is not as important as what the person's telling you. So like, prove it. I don't know. It just doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And now, because there's so little trust, it's like a hair trigger. So anytime I do something that's not authentic, people feel it. That's been my experience.
Because it's not authentic. So the idea of, I'm going to learn how to be authentic, and then I'm going to go out and be authentic because that helps me sell more units. By definition, and this is ethical persuasion right here, doesn't work at all, because it's not real. Real is real.
Real's real. With the Russell Brunson stuff, we talked this yesterday with Matt Harms. He's a ghostwriter, and he shared with us a piece of collateral that he made. You know, how to monetize after writing your book. Right. And he's like, guys, I'm sorry, it's really prescriptive. Here's what other people did with their book. Okay, that might be useful. There might be a cookbook to use and then make your own recipe. There might be some of that, but like the authentic gift and the authentic share is going to be unique to the individual. What
Right.
feels good, what resonates in the market. How do you figure that out?
How do you figure that out? And there's three, I think, components that can come together. So the first component is the laws, the principles, the mechanisms in that domain need to be fully having been fully explored by whoever's leading that group in our community. So everyone has to be an expert in their domain. So I'm an expert in business development, entrepreneur structures, markets and shifts and trends in markets. I'm an expert in groups and communities, and I'm an expert in inner development because I've been doing it all since I was 17 years old.
Mhm.
And I have been fully immersed in this whole thing. So that's one thing. You need an expert that's actually been circled. And what is an expert? An expert is a point where all of a sudden, for a long period of time, you just see it and you're like, oh, it's another one of those. Oh, it's another one of those. Oh, it's another one of those. Because it's just a repetition at a certain point. That's one. Second is it's understanding then frameworks. So the
Mhm.
expert can put a framework together that's not about them doing it. And that took me almost 2 years to figure out how to do that because I'm like, I know it. How do I help you know it? It
Mhm.
took me 2 years to figure out how to put a framework together that wasn't just about me. It's about everybody because I understand the context of the full market. This is a long one here, and then I'll let Brian go. And then the third thing I call a playbook. And the playbook is not a prescriptive, go do it like this because that's my way. The playbook is you need more form than others because this area is really hard for you.
Mhm.
This is not your natural tendency. So, for people who can think like I think, magical creator types, motivating power types, people who just have that natural entrepreneur thing, they don't need a lot of form from me. They don't need a playbook. I'll have one though, so you can read it and then you throw it away. Other
Right.
people, like Sharon in our group, was like, she's like, I need more of a playbook.
Yeah.
And that gave me the idea of the playbook. And then she's doing the Jeff Walker product launch formula stuff. And I'm like, stop doing that. It's not going to work, Sharon. I said, however, the idea of launching a movie from Hollywood out into the world is a good idea. She doesn't, that's not enough for her. She needs a real playbook for that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting with the breath and the energy imagination stuff. I just quit knowing that I can teach you how to breathe. I can't. What I can do is I can point out 8 or 12 different breathing modalities for it to maybe spark your divine way of breathing. So, learning the form and then finding the formless is actually the transition. And I'm learning also the mechanics of breathing is not as important as what does the breathing do, energy wise, health wise, and invincibility wise. And my method of doing that for me, I know is not the method for you. It could be similar or it could be completely different.
We had an incredible session on that. And I don't know if you remember, you'll remember. So this was like maybe a month and a half ago. And, we're on a call and I'm like, Brian, I'm trying to work through something. How should I do this? And that was all I said.
Mhm.
Like, trying to work through something. What do you see? What do you see? Because Brian's an expert in things I'm not an expert in. He can visualize it. He can see it in a different way. So I'm in the car and I got my laptop in front of me, and he's like, "Let's connect the circuit." We're talking about samadhi. We're talking about union. We're talking now about the microcosmic orbit. It's called. So I'm trying to connect my circuit to get it deeper into this new state that I'm trying to get to. And Brian's explaining to me how to do it, and I can't follow him. And then I'm like, and I realized right away, I'm like, and I said to him, I said, "Are you talking about the microcosmic orbit?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, I'm good. I got it." And I did it my way.
Yeah.
And then we're there, and then you could take me to the next step. That's because we're experts in this. Now, if you're not an expert and you're dealing with someone who's not an expert, like Brian is in breath, because there's sound, light, and breath. It's
Mhm.
not just breath. So you're so far ahead in all of those things that you can see me back in a different way. And that took you a lot of soak time, as you like to call it, to get there.
Yes, and I want to name the gift in that. Like I don't remember my first breath session. I don't
Hmm.
remember what that's like. And
Too
so
far, too far in the past.
yeah, maybe.
Hmm.
But what I do get is when I work with somebody else, that I get to see the world through their eyes for the first time. And it's just such a gift. Like I've got this white piece of paper in front of me. We can do this any way that we want together. So what's the experience? What do they already know? It's the idea of like the way that a snowflake forms. There's a particle and there's a crystal that forms around the particle. That's how learning works in my little model. What do you already know? What metaphor can we make around what you already know to teach a different thing, but it's similar to what's already known? That's the key I'm finding.
So in the Invincibility Dojo this morning, it was completely different than yesterday, and it was completely different than the day before, and it was completely different than Monday, because you're coming in and you're looking at everybody and you're like, all right, what's going on here? And you are working behind the scenes doing things we can't even understand. Then we go to More Money Now. The same thing's happening with me because I'm the expert in that
Mhm.
part. How do you get in a market with a product that's unique, meaning you and the combination of everything that makes you up? And how do you connect with people in a way that doesn't include marketing persuasion? Throw this book away. Read this book. It's awesome. Learn it and then throw it away. Do not use these things in the marketplace. This is the book I give most often as a president, is my top recommendation, Charlie Munger, because it's brilliant, not because Charlie Munger and Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett built their company using persuasion marketing like McDonald's does. No,
No,
they didn't do that.
they were experts in understanding economics.
Yeah, and Warren Buffett talks about it, and I love the way he explains this. And it's one of the most important things this guy's ever said. He said, looking at a financial statement to me is like painting. And I'm like, he can see things in the 10K documents, and
Yep.
he'll go back and read all of them. He can see the entire company, where it's going. He can see the entire market, and he can place a bet, him and Charlie, because they place everything on laws, principles, and mechanisms because they're so good. And who else does that? Well, you have to have the soak time. You have to learn, and they can teach other people how to do it if they're willing to listen. But they don't, because Wall Street's greedy on a quarterly earnings target trajectory and listens to analysts. Why would you listen to a stock analyst if you run a company and you're a CEO? That's ridiculous.
They're actually sales guys, aren't they?
Well, yes, right, for the
Sales
financial
and
companies.
marketing.
Yeah, right, they're marketing for the financial and investment houses.
Right.
It's the most ridiculous system constructed. And Charlie Munger said Wall Street has too much power. That's what he meant.
And I know that's true because like folks at the Fed are calling Charlie Munger to explain the market to them.
Well, Ray Dalio.
Oh, Ray Dalio, that's what I
So
meant.
yeah, let me bring this book out.
Thank you for
This is
the
good.
accuracy.
I'm glad you made this. Okay, so for people who don't know, there's a guy. His name is Ray Dalio. He wrote a book called. See the name of this book? Principles.
Principles.
Principles. What does he do? He's a hedge fund man. He runs a hedge fund. What do? They reduce risk for people. They're not trading money like Axe Capital in billions just to make more money. That's bullshit.
Right.
What they're doing is they're reducing risk for their corporate clients. That's what this is about. That's what this business is about. The Fed shouldn't be bringing somebody like that into the office to ask them what's going on in the economy. They should know, but they don't know because they're economists and they have no idea. Ray Dalio's been in the markets his whole life. And that's how he taught me this idea. That's why I'm getting the languages. Oh, it's another one of those. Oh, it's another one of those. Oh, it's another one of those.
So Ray taught me something as it applies to what we're talking about. In that, if I follow someone else's prescription, and so let's say it's a Facebook lead generation technique, and the algorithm changes, I'm fucked. Like it doesn't work anymore. Now I got to call whoever my Facebook lead guy is, and most likely you're gonna say I don't know. They changed the algorithm. Great. What Ray Dalio did in 2019, he bet $1.5 billion in the form of shorting the stock market before COVID happened. Made a fortune
Because he could see
because
it.
he was in the market. He was in the economic ecosystem.
Yeah. So Sam Ovens, who founded School, and now Alex Hormozy's promoting the hell out of this thing. I took Sam's video course, and I actually did a School community a year and a half ago, and then I closed it down because it wasn't going to work for me. And I did Sam Ovens' course. Sam Ovens tried to teach from principles, but he wasn't an expert in it.
Mm.
And the reason I kept going with it is because he made more money than me. So I got confused. So I went into the opinion of, oh, he knows and I don't. I went through that whole course, and he said what you said. He said, well, let's not go to Facebook yet. Let's not go to, because he knows everybody wants to go to Facebook. And he's doing these 2-hour crazy videos about stuff he doesn't understand yet. Philosophical, spiritual, physics, all the stuff you and I are so deep in. I can't explain it the way you do, though. I don't understand physics like you do. I understand it like I do. You understand it at a deeper level and a mathematical level. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand it conceptually. I understand it like with thought experiments, not like Einstein's thought experiments, but I have my own entry point to it. So I do Sam's course. I kept going with the course because he made all this money. And then at the end, I'm like, all I learned was I can do a course like this. I'm like, it's wrong because he doesn't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
He's experimenting, but I spent $2,000 on that thing.
He's experimenting in the market, which is huge. That's a huge principle of yours.
It's a huge principle, but you have to know your limits. So we're getting somewhere right now. So there's a principle called know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And there's also another principle called there's unknown unknowns, which means know that you don't know everything. So if you use persuasion marketing like Sam did to get me to buy that stupid course in the stupid school community idea from a year and a half ago, I'm going to drown in it because the persuasion marketing itself negates the truth of the principles and the laws and the mechanisms that always work underneath it. Because the person selling it is doing that from a standpoint of really insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. And that's why people feel imposter syndrome a lot, because they don't know what they're doing and they don't understand what limitations are, or they can say, I don't really know yet. I'm figuring this out. Let me teach people in that course what I actually know. Now I don't need any persuasion marketing. I can just tell people about it.
I had a strange experience with a leader of a networking group, and I showed up and did my homework. I knew from his lieutenants what the actual challenges were before I got there, and I shared it with him.
And I remember this story.
And
we got 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes, and then I got a call. Why don't you wrap up the story, though?
Haven't heard from him because I didn't use his method of connecting.
Right. He didn't kick you out of the group, but you triggered him because you didn't follow his prescriptive authority, and you did your own thing.
Yep. Wasn't his thing.
Yeah. Leah Turner, who's one of these LinkedIn celebrities who created an echo chamber of people who need somebody to tell them what to do, kicked me out of her whole community in September. She kicked me out September of 2023. It was through a customer service email saying, you're not a good fit and we're going to return your money without an explanation. And I know why. It's because I questioned her guru-ness with a member of the community, and I was a bit of a jerk. I didn't do it kindly. I gave the woman some advice. I didn't give her advice. I remember now. I invited her to something. And she said, well, Leah says before you invite people, you should comment on their posts. And I said, do you always listen to what mommy does? She was pissed. And she went back to mommy and said, well, look what he did. He's me, whatever. And she kicked me out of the group and banned me from seeing her profile. And I'm like, that's a fraud. Mm-hmm. She's a fraud. It's not real. What is the principles underneath that? Where is the love? Where is the understanding? Where is the knowledge? Where is the wisdom in any of that? None whatsoever.
2 ways of selling something: using fear, old model; using love and understanding as the new model.
Brian, I will see you in 30 minutes, I think.